Hey guys, what the heck is up? Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another episode of True Crime. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the support on my first video. If you want, I've created a playlist that will have all the true crime videos in it if you want to go check them out. And that is all I have to say. I actually got an intro made specifically for these videos, so I hope you enjoy that, and let's get into the story of Susan Powell and her family. I also want to note before this video begins, this is your trigger warning. There is child death, there is murder, there is a bunch of different things in this video, so if that is something that will trigger you, please click out of this video now. I have so many other positive videos that will not upset you, but this is a very serious case, a very heart-wrenching case, so here's your warning. Susan Cox Powell was born October 16th, 1981 in Oregon. Susan was known to be very fun, loving, outgoing, caring, every positive trait that you could ever think of, but most importantly, she was known to be a great mother to her two sons. Josh Powell was born January 20th, 1976. He was also born in Oregon, however, there wasn't as many positive things to say about him and his childhood. He was raised in a very abusive household. His father, Stephen, at a very young age began showing him pornography. He was very abusive and just never taught his children the boundaries between right and wrong. It was also noted that Josh had attempted suicide. He did not succeed with that. He also had threatened to kill his mom over doing the dishes, and it was also noted that as a child he would kill his siblings' gerbils, so he at a very young age had a very dark life. Josh's parents ended up divorcing as his father Stephen did not follow religion that their family did, which was the LDS community. They were Mormons, and Susan's family was also part of the same community, and that is where Josh and Susan met in 2000. They met in November of 2000 when she was just 19 and were married by April of 2001. Everyone warned them that they were going a little bit too fast, but when you're young and you think you know, no one's really gonna stop you. So they were married shortly after meeting, as I said, in 2001. For a brief time after their marriage, they moved in with Josh's dad, Stephen. Stephen developed a very weird love obsession with Susan. He would secretly record her and take photos of her. He would look at her through mirrors. He would steal her underwear, go through her journals. He even went as far as writing a love song about her and posting it online under a different alias. When he confessed his love to Susan, obviously it creeped her out and it urged them to move out of his house. After they moved out, the couple decided to go to West Valley City, Utah, where they would start their family. Josh maintained numerous jobs, however, Susan had a more stable job at Wells Fargo in the investment department. Shortly after they moved there, in January 19th, 2005, the couple had their first son, Charles. 2 years after that, on January 2nd, 2007, they had their second son, Braden. At this point, the family, I feel like in almost any sort of crime video you hear, the family was portrayed to not have any problems. They seemed perfect. They were young, they were beautiful, they had 2 kids, they had jobs, they had just moved to a new city. Everything from the outsider looking in looked perfect. However, Susan started confiding in one of her best friends, Darlene, about her marriage. She noticed that he became more and more controlling, and she felt more of an object to Josh than a wife. When she mentioned leaving Josh, he would state that the kids are mine and they will always be mine. Just if you leave, you're not gonna get them. Just really mean things like that that made it hard for her to leave the marriage. On top of the marriage problems that this couple was facing, shortly after their second son was born in 2007, Josh had filed for bankruptcy, which made him more and more controlling of Susan. And shortly after that, in 2008, there was a very eerie video that Susan posted, and I'm going to play that for you in just a second, but she went around and stated her name and showed the family's assets in case anything ever happened to her or her family. Now, this might be something that you just do to document things. However, shortly after that, she did write a note saying, if I was murdered, it might not be an accident, even if it looks like it. So that made the video a little bit more eerie and you can watch it for yourself and come up with your own conclusions. December 6th, 2009 started out as a normal Sunday for the Powell family. Susan took the boys to church, and after they hung out with one of Susan's friends in the late afternoon, early evening, Susan cut it short because she was not feeling good and she was going to take the rest of the night to rest. That was the last time Susan would ever be seen by anyone but her family. It was the very next day, December 7th, 2009, where the entire family was reported missing. The kids did not show up to daycare, and when the daycare tried to contact both parents, neither answered. At that point, they reached out to other family. The police were called. The police showed up at the house. No one answered. So they were able to break in due to the fact that they thought the family may have died of carbon monoxide poisoning. It was at that time they realized that the house was empty. However, their couch had 2 box fans facing it, and there was a wet spot. This wet spot later on was determined to be Susan's blood. They were able to confirm that. The DNA also showed an undetermined man's DNA as well, but that is what that situation was. Her wallet and ID were also there, however her cell phone was not. In the late evening of December 7th, Josh returned home with his children, but Susan was not there. He had stated around 12:30 a.m. he decided to take his sons on a camping trip about an hour and a half away from where they live. It was a place called Simpson Spring, and not only was this a red flag because who takes their toddlers camping at 12:30 a.m. on a Sunday when you work on Monday? The temperatures were also below freezing, and so this just didn't make sense. However, the children did confirm that they did go camping with their dad. Charles did state that his mom went with them camping. She just didn't come home. A couple days later, on December 9th, that is when the police confirmed that that was Susan's DNA and blood. They also confirmed that a life policy for Susan for $1.5 million had been taken out. And that is also when they found the letter about what I mentioned, her saying if I was murdered, that, or if I was killed, it might not be an accident. Within a week of her disappearance and all of the investigations, Josh was declared the main person of interest for the disappearance of Susan Powell. On December 10th, they were able to go to Simpson Springs and find the campsite that Josh had described to them. They did not find any evidence that Susan had been there or that anything had happened at the campsite. As I mentioned, their oldest son Charles had stated that their mom went with them. She just did not return. He later stated that his mom was dead. The youngest son, Braden, also had made a drawing at one point of them in the van, and there was only 3 people in the van. He said that his mommy was in the trunk. On December 14th, Josh hired his attorney and became a lot less cooperative about doing interviews and answering questions and everything like that. A few days after hiring an attorney, Josh took his sons to go stay with his dad in Puyallup. I think I might have messed that up. I had to Google how to say it, so I'm so sorry if I did. To stay with his dad throughout the holidays. On January 6th, he returned to his home in Utah, packed up the rest of his stuff with his brother Michael to move back to Washington permanently with his sons. He had claimed that he could not afford to live in Utah alone, that he had lost his job, and that he just wanted to get back to his family. This is a little bit weird because your wife had gone missing very shortly before you moved. Normally if someone goes missing, you don't want to leave the area very soon. It was weird that he just so quickly moved without any attachment, emotion, anything like that. Just could pick up and leave the home where his wife went missing. It also was very strange that he said he could no longer afford to live in Utah, as throughout the investigation the police realized that he had taken out the $1 million insurance on Susan, so he should have been able to afford to live there if he wanted to. It was also noted at an employee Christmas party that Josh was stating if he ever had to get away with murder, he would hide the body in a mine shaft in West Utah, which is a very red flag as well. And when he moved in with his father Stephen was also investigated for the murder. He was deemed innocent and they stopped doing their investigation on him. Investigators also learned that Stephen was obsessed with Susan. As I had stated earlier in this story, police pulled his computer and found over 4,000 images of Susan that should not have been on his computer. Obviously, this was a very weird thing infuriated her family, which then caused a lot of conflict between the families, and Susan's dad, Chuck, actually filed for custody of the two children shortly after this happened. Police also began to investigate Josh's brother Michael when they realized that he had sold his Ford Taurus to a wrecking yard in Pentland, Oregon shortly after Susan's disappearance. Shortly after they found out that he had sold his car, they ordered a satellite overview of the lot. They were able to find the car and bring in search dogs. They were able to confirm that there had been a decomposing body in the car at one point. However, the DNA tests came back inconclusive, so there wasn't much that they could do on that end. After a police raid of Josh and Stephen's house in 2011, Stephen was arrested for charges of child pornography and other disturbing things. The feud, as I had mentioned, became increasingly intense between the families, and that is when Chuck filed for custody of the children, as I had mentioned previously. He did receive temporary custody of the kids, and it was stated that Josh could get his children back once he officially moved out of Stephen's house. As Stephen was arrested for pornography of their mom, it was a little... After a bit of time in 2011, after some court cases and some time, Josh was deemed capable of seeing his children under supervision of a social worker. This was due to the fact that he had a stable job, no documented child abuse, and they just thought he was capable of being around his children, just not full custody. So that did begin in 2011. In early 2012, they found pornography on Josh's computer as well. However, after the court reviewed it, they decided not to take away his rights to see his children as long as it was still being supervised under a social worker. On February 5th, 2012, caseworker Elizabeth Griffin Hall took the children to Josh's house like a normal visit would go. I think it's also important to note that sometimes the children would make comments about not wanting to go and see their dad, but it was one of those things when you're little and you just, I always see little kids do that. It's just you want to play at your home with your toys, and whenever they would get there, they would have fun with him, so they continued the visitations. When they got to Josh's house on February 5th, the kids ran in. He was waiting for them, ran in, just like you would if you saw someone and you were little. And Elizabeth was shortly behind them. He looked Elizabeth in the face and slammed the door and would not let her in. At this point, she got concerned and tried to knock on the door. She began to hear the little kids screaming and crying, which was a very big red flag on top of the red flag that had just occurred. So she ran to call 911. The 911 call, I'm going to play with you. The dispatcher, every time I hear it, it just makes me more and more angry. I will let you guys form your own opinions on it, but I'm just gonna play it and you guys can make your own conclusions.
Hey, I'm on a supervised visitation for a court-ordered visit, and something really weird has happened. The kids went into the house, and the parent, the biological parent, whose name is Josh Powell, will not let me in the door. What should I do?
What's the address?
It's 8119, and I think it's 89th. I don't know what the address is.
Okay, that's pretty important for me to know.
I'm sorry, I can't. Just a minute. Let me get in my car and see if I can find it. Nothing like this has ever happened before at these visitations, so I'm really shocked. And I could hear one of the kids crying, but he still wouldn't let me in. Okay, it is just a minute. I have it here. You can't find me by GPS?
No.
Okay, it is, I still can't find it. But I think I need help right away. He's on a very short lease with DSHS, and CPS has been involved. And this is the craziest thing. He looked right at me and closed the door. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just waiting to know where you are.
Okay. It's 8119 189th Street, Court East, Puyallup, 98375. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in.
You want to pull out of the driveway because you smell gasoline, but he won't let you...
He won't let me in.
He won't let you out of the driveway?
He won't let me in the house.
Whose house
Got
is
the
it?
kids in the house and he won't let me in. It's a supervised visit.
I understand. Whose house is it?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you don't live there, right?
No, I don't. No, I'm contracted to the state to provide supervised visitation.
I see. Okay. And who is there to exercise their visitation?
I am. And the visit is with Josh Powell.
And who
And he
supervises?
is the husband that I supervise.
So you supervise and you're doing the visit?
Yeah,
You
I
supervise yourself?
I supervise myself. I'm the supervisor here.
Wait a minute. If it's a supervised visit, you can't supervise yourself. If you're the
I
visitor...
do supervise myself. I'm the supervisor for the supervised visit.
Okay, well, aren't you the one making the visit? Or is there another
I'm
parent
the one.
that you're supervising?
No, I'm the one that supervises. I pick up the kids at their grandparent.
Yes. And then who visits with the children?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you're supposed to be there to supervise Josh Powell's visit with the children.
Yes, that's correct.
And how did...
And he's the husband of missing Susan Powell. This is a high-profile case.
How did he gain access to the children before you got there?
I was one step in back of them.
Okay, so they went into the house and then he locked you out.
Yes, he shut the door right in my face.
All right, now it's clear.
Now to the dramatic 911 calls revealed from the Powell family tragedy. Those chilling calls made right after Josh Powell's house exploded into an inferno.
And were you calling about the fire in the 8200 block of
Yes,
188th Street,
he
Brittany?
the house.
And you think he might have done this intentionally?
Yes.
Their official deaths were due to carbon monoxide poisoning. There was also a hatchet found close to Josh. The kids did have marks on them, so their guess is that he was trying to kill them in a different way before exploding the house, however suffocated with the carbon monoxide, which is just so heartbreaking and just... I can't even comprehend that this is a real thing. They also found 2 5-gallon containers of gasoline, and it was also noted that the morning, couple hours prior to the suicide and death of his 2 sons, that he had reached out via email to numerous people and said, "I'm sorry, goodbye." After the death, they went to Stephen and told him about the deaths and wanted to kind of maybe get some information about where Susan's whereabouts could be. It was at this point he pleaded the 5th. They do believe that he knew exactly what happened to Susan, but was just not cooperating with police. About a year after the death of the 2 boys and Josh, his brother Michael committed suicide in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And on May 21st, 2013, they did close the case of Susan Powell. Her family is still working on getting an official death statement for Susan, but that had not been confirmed yet. And that is it for this case. I need to figure out how you end such sad things. This case is just so crazy, and I will link any information down below if you want to read it on even smaller details of this case. There's shows, books, podcasts, so many things, just diving in for hours and hours on this case, as it's just, as you can tell, so crazy, and there's so many different directions and everything like that. So I will link those down below for you, and I will see you guys in a couple days for another video. Good? Bye.